The sun hung merciless over Sagebrush Creek, a dusty scar of a town where the railroad was pushing its iron fingers westward. The year was 1870, and progress came with the price of sweat, blood, and broken promises. Main Street stretched like a parched throat between weathered buildings, their false fronts propped up against the endless sky like cardboard cutouts of civilization. Elizabeth Eliza Hawthorne stood on the warped porch of the Dusty Rose Saloon, her mother's legacy and her own burden. At 23, she had the kind of beauty that the harsh frontier couldn't quite erase. Auburn hair that caught fire in the afternoon light, green eyes that held both defiance and weariness, and hands that knew both the weight of a water bucket and the grip of her father's old Navy Colt. The saloon had seen better days. Paint peeled from its boards like sunburned skin, and the sign creaked in the hot wind with a sound like old bones. But it was hers, or would be if she could keep Darius Thorne's greedy hands off it. "Well, well," came a voice thick with tobacco and contempt. "If it ain't the half-blood girl playing at being a proper business owner." Eliza's jaw tightened as three men approached. She recognized them as Thorne's boys, Jake Morrison, with his pock-marked face and mean eyes, Bull Henderson, whose name suited his size and intellect, and Slim Garrett, who made up for his narrow frame with a wide, cruel streak. "Afternoon. Gentlemen," she said, keeping her voice steady as bedrock. "The Dusty Rose is closed until 5. You're welcome to come back then." Jake spat a stream of tobacco juice that landed inches from her worn boots. "Mister, Thorne sent us with another offer. Real generous one. Considering." "Considering what?" Eliza's hand drifted casually toward the Winchester propped against the doorframe. "Considering you got no man to protect you, no family name worth spit, and debts piling up higher than a Kansas snowdrift." Jake's grin revealed teeth stained brown as river mud. "Face it, girl. This ain't no place for a woman alone, especially one with mixed blood running through her veins." The word stung like alkali dust in an open wound. Her mother, Rose Hawthorne, had been the daughter of a French trader and a Cherokee woman, in a town where being different meant being less than human. Eliza had learned young to hold her chin high and her tongue sharp. "My blood's my own business," she said, "as is my saloon. Tell Mr. Thorne my answer hasn't changed. The Dusty Rose isn't for sale." Bull took a menacing step forward, wood groaning under his weight. "Maybe you need some convincing. Maybe we start with them nice windows of yours." The sound of hooves on hard-packed earth interrupted him. All heads turned as a lone rider emerged from the heat shimmer at the edge of town. He sat his horse like he was born to it, a black Mustang that moved with the fluid grace of smoke. The man himself was a study in contrasts, wore his dark hair long in the Apache way, but his worn leather duster and low-slung gun belt marked him as something else entirely. As he drew closer, Eliza could make out features that would haunt her dreams in nights to come, angular cheekbones that spoke of native blood, but eyes the color of winter sky that hinted at European ancestry. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against sun-darkened skin. He couldn't have been more than 30, but something in those eyes suggested he'd lived several lifetimes already. The stranger reined up near the saloon, his gaze taking in the scene with the quick assessment of a man who'd learned to read trouble like scripture. When he dismounted, it was with an economy of movement that spoke of coiled readiness. "Afternoon," he said, his voice carrying a trace of accent Eliza couldn't place. "Looking for a room and a meal? This establishment open?" Jake turned, hand dropping to his pistol. "Move along, Breed. This ain't your concern." The stranger's eyes narrowed slightly, but his expression remained calm as still water. "Seems to me a man's got a right to inquire about lodging in a public house." "Not when that man's got Apache blood," Slim added, fingers dancing near his gun. "We got enough problems without your kind stirring up trouble." The stranger's smile was a dangerous thing, sharp as a skinning knife. "My kind." He stepped forward, and despite being outnumbered 3-1, There was something in his bearing that made the Thorn men shift uneasily. And what kind would that be? The kind that should know when they're not wanted. Jake growled. Funny thing about want, the stranger said, his hand resting easy near his Colt. Sometimes what folks want and what they get are two different things entirely. The tension stretched taut as fence wire. Eliza found herself holding her breath, waiting for the violence that seemed inevitable as thunder after lightning. But it was Bull who broke first, taking a step back. "This ain't over," Jake said, though his voice had lost some of its edge. He jerked his head at his companions. "Mr. Thorn will hear about this. Both of you better watch your backs." They mounted up and rode off, dust devils dancing in their wake. The stranger watched them go, then turned to Eliza with a slight bow. "Apologies if I caused you trouble. Ma'am, name's Samuel Ronan, though most folks just call me Ronan." "Eliza Hawthorne," she replied, studying him with new interest. Samuel Ronan, an Irish name paired with Apache features. Another mixed blood, another outsider. "And you didn't cause trouble, just postponed it a spell." "Darius Thorne's men. You know him." "Know of him. Railroad money and a soul black as a mine shaft." Ronan glanced at the saloon. "This your place?" "It is, such as it is." She hesitated, then made a decision that would change everything. "You're welcome to a room if you've got coin, meal too. Though I should warn you, staying here might not be the smartest decision you'll make today." That dangerous smile returned. "Ma'am, I haven't made a smart decision in years. No sense in starting now." As Eliza led him inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that Sagebrush Creek had just become a more interesting and infinitely more dangerous place. The Dusty Rose's dim interior offered blessed relief from the sun, though the heat still pressed close as a fever. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light streaming through gaps in the shutters. "It isn't much," she said, suddenly aware of the saloon's shabbiness, mismatched tables and chairs, a bar scarred by years of use, a piano that hadn't been tuned since her mother's death 2 years prior. "It's standing," Ronan observed. "In my experience, that counts for something." He removed his hat, revealing hair black as crow feathers. "How long has Thorn been pressuring you?" Eliza moved behind the bar, needing the barrier between them. This man unsettled her in ways that had nothing to do with fear. "Since the railroad announced the new route. My land sits right where he wants to build his depot and warehouses." "And you won't sell." "Would you?" She met his gaze squarely. "This place was my mother's dream. She built it up from nothing, served drinks to cowboys and miners, kept the peace when she could and broke it up when she couldn't. It's all I have left of her." "Family's important," Ronan said quietly. "The dead as much as the living." Something in his tone made her wonder about his own ghosts. But she didn't press. Instead, she poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the good stuff she kept hidden beneath the bar. "To stubborn women and foolish men," she offered. "To those who stand when others would run," he countered. They drank, and the whiskey burned away some of the day's bitterness. Outside, Sagebrush Creek went about its business, unaware that the seeds of change had been planted in the dusty soil of the Dusty Rose Saloon. As the afternoon wore on, Eliza found herself stealing glances at this enigmatic stranger who'd inserted himself into her troubles. Samuel Ronan was a puzzle clearly educated despite his rough appearance, moving with the grace of a predator but showing the manners of a gentleman. He helped her prepare for the evening crowd without being asked, fixing a loose table leg and oiling the squeaky saloon doors. "You're handy," she observed as he worked. "Man learns to be useful or he learns to be dead," he replied. "I preferred the former." Speaking from experience. His hand stilled for a moment. "More than I care to remember." The first customers began filtering in as the sun dropped toward the horizon. Cowboys from the nearby ranches, a few townsmen brave enough to risk Thorn's displeasure. and the usual collection of drifters and dreamers that every frontier town attracted. Eliza moved among them with practiced ease, serving drinks and deflecting advances with equal skill. She noticed how Ronan positioned himself at a corner table, back to the wall and eyes on both doors. A gunfighter's habit. He nursed a single beer through the evening, and she saw how his gaze tracked every movement in the room while appearing to look at nothing in particular. It was past 9 when trouble walked through the door again. Not Thorne's men this time, but 3 cowboys from the Rocking Bee Ranch, already well into their cups from somewhere else. They were young, loud, and looking for entertainment. "Hey there, pretty thing," the tallest one called to Eliza. "How much for a dance?" "This isn't that kind of establishment," she replied evenly. "But I can offer you whiskey or beer." "Ah, come on now. Pretty girl like you. Bit of Indian in you. Right heard tell Indian women know how to show a man a good time." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eliza's hand tightened on the bottle she was holding. "You heard wrong," she said. "Now either order a drink or move along." The cowboy lurched forward, reaching across the bar. "Don't be like that. Honey, just trying to be friendly." His words cut off in a gurgle as a hand grabbed his collar and yanked him backward. Ronan stood there, calm as a midnight lake. "Lady said this isn't that kind of place," he said conversationally. "Man should respect that." The cowboy's friends jumped up, hands moving to their guns. The entire saloon held its breath. "This ain't your business. Breed," one of them snarled. "Made it my business when you disrespected the lady." Ronan's voice never rose, but something in it made the hair on Eliza's neck stand up. "Now you boys have 2 choices. You can apologize to Miss Hawthorne and leave peaceable-like, or we can discuss this outside, and I guarantee you won't like how that conversation ends." The tall cowboy jerked free, face flushed with anger and shame. For a moment, violence trembled in the air like heat lightning. Then, perhaps seeing something in Ronan's eyes that gave him pause, he backed down. "Come on, boys," he muttered. "Ain't worth the trouble." They left, and slowly the saloon returned to life. Eliza found her hands were trembling slightly as she set down the bottle. "Thank you," she said when Ronan returned to his table. "Though I could have handled it." "No doubt," he agreed. "But sometimes it's easier when folks see they're outnumbered." "We weren't outnumbered. It was 3 against 1. That smile again, quick and sharp. "That's what I mean. Poor boys didn't stand a chance." Despite herself, Eliza laughed. It felt good, like rain after a long drought. She brought him another beer. "On the house." "So, what brings you to Sagebrush Creek, Mr. Ronan, besides rescuing stubborn saloon owners?" "Sam," he corrected. "And I'm just passing through. Looking for work, maybe. Heard the railroad was hiring." "For Thorne." She couldn't keep the disappointment out of her voice. "Man's gotta eat. But there are other outfits, freight companies, stage lines." He studied her over his glass. "You always run this place alone." "Had help until recently? My bartender lit out last week after Thorne's men paid him a visit. The serving girl before that?" She shrugged, trying for casual. People get nervous when they cross a powerful man. "Yet you stay." "Where would I go? This is home. This is—" She gestured at the faded wallpaper, the dusty bottles, the memories soaked into every board. "This is all I have." "Sometimes all is enough," he said quietly, "if you're willing to fight for it." Their eyes met and held, and Eliza felt something shift inside her chest. This stranger, this man with his mixed blood and mysterious past, understood something fundamental about her that others missed: the determination, the refusal to bend, the fierce need to claim a place in a world that would deny it to her. The evening wound down, customers drifting away until only a few remained. Eliza was wiping down tables when she heard the sound of breaking glass from the storeroom. She grabbed the shotgun from behind the bar and moved quickly toward the back. Ronan somehow beside her without her hearing him move. The back door stood open, night air cooling the sweat on her skin. A figure was silhouetted against the darkness, and she recognized Bull Henderson's massive frame. "That's far enough," she said, leveling the shotgun. Bull turned, grinning. In his hand was a torch, flames dancing hungry and bright. "Just thought you might need some light back here," he said. "Place could use some brightening up." "Put it out and get off my property. Or what, you'll shoot me in the back." "Don't think the law would look kindly on that, even if you are Bill Hawthorne's daughter." "Maybe she won't," Ronan said from the shadows. "But I might." Bull spun, the torch wavering. Ronan stood relaxed, hand nowhere near his gun. But something in his stillness was more menacing than any threat. "You're making a mistake. Breed Mr. Thorne." "Isn't here," Ronan finished. "Just you, making foolish choices in the dark. Now put out that torch and walk away, or we find out how well you burn." For a long moment, they stood frozen. Then Bull cursed and dropped the torch, stomping it out with his boots. "This ain't over," he growled, echoing Jake's earlier words. "Never is." Ronan agreed amiably. "But tonight it is. Move along." After Bull disappeared into the night, Eliza lowered the shotgun with shaking hands. "They'll be back, with more men." "Probably. This is going to get worse before it gets better." "Usually does." She looked at him. This stranger who'd walked into her life bare hours ago and already stood with her against the storm. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Ronan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Maybe I'm tired of seeing people like Thorne take what they want just because they can. Maybe I think a person's got a right to stand their ground, no matter their blood or circumstances." He paused. "Or maybe I just don't like being told where I'm not wanted." "Is that all?" In the moonlight, his scarred face was unreadable. "For now." They returned to the saloon in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As Eliza locked up for the night, she wondered what she'd started by letting this man into her life. Trouble, certainly. Perhaps disaster. But as she climbed the stairs to her small room above the saloon, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow in a way she hadn't in months. Change was coming to Sagebrush Creek, riding in on a black Mustang with eyes like winter sky. And Eliza Hawthorne, for better or worse, was ready to meet it head-on. The morning sun cast long shadows down Main Street as Eliza descended the stairs, her body aching from a restless night. She had barely slept, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building, expecting Thorne's men to return, but the night had passed quietly, and now the dusty rose stood defiant in the dawn light. She found Samuel Ronan already awake, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee that he'd somehow managed to brew without waking her. His black Mustang stood hip-shot at the hitching post, tail swishing lazily at flies. "Morning," she said, surprised by how natural his presence felt. "Miss Hawthorne?" He nodded, offering her his cup. "Coffee's fresh." "Well, fresh as month-old beans can make it." She accepted gratefully, the bitter warmth chasing away the morning chill. "Just Eliza, we're past formalities, I think." "Fair enough." He leaned back against the post, studying the empty street. "Quiet morning." Too quiet. She knew the town's rhythms like her own heartbeat. By now, there should be freight wagons rolling through, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, the usual morning bustle. Instead, Sagebrush Creek felt like it was holding its breath. Her instincts proved right when Martha Coleman, who ran the general store, hurried across the street. The older woman's face was pinched with worry. "Eliza, dear," Martha said, glancing nervously at Ronan. "I came to warn you. There's talk, ugly talk." "When isn't there?" Eliza replied, but her stomach tightened. "This is different. Thorne's been making rounds, talking to the merchants, Says anyone who does business with the Dusty Rose will find their credit dried up, their shipments delayed. Martha wrung her hands. I'm sorry, dear. I can't afford to. I understand. Eliza cut her off gently. You've got your own family to think about. After Martha scurried away, Eliza stood rigid, hands clenched. Another blow, another piece of her world crumbling. Soon she'd have no suppliers, no credit, no way to keep the doors open. Smart play, Ronan observed. Starve you out without firing a shot. He's done this before. Ran the Hendersons off their farm. Bought out Jake Paulson's freight company for pennies on the dollar. She kicked at a loose board, frustration boiling over. And everyone just lets it happen. Fear's a powerful thing. Makes good people do nothing? Is that what you do, nothing? He was quiet for a moment, then stood with that fluid grace. I ever tell you why I left the territory? She shook her head, curious despite her anger. There was a town, smaller than this, mining camp. Really, company wanted the land. Same as here. The people fought back. His eyes went distant, seeing something beyond the dusty street. Company hired guns, Pinkertons. When the smoke cleared, wasn't much town left. Women, children, didn't matter to hired killers. What happened? The words were flat, emotionless. Took me 3 months to track them all down. The hired guns, the company men who gave the orders. Law called it murder, I called it justice. Eliza felt a chill despite the warming day. This man beside her wasn't just a drifter or a gunfighter. He was something more dangerous. A man with his own code, his own sense of right and wrong. So you understand, she said quietly, why I can't just walk away. I understand. Question is, how far are you willing to go to keep what's yours? Before she could answer, a commotion erupted down the street. A crowd was gathering near the bank. Voices raised in excitement or alarm. Eliza and Ronan moved toward the noise, her unease growing with each step. At the center of the crowd stood Darius Thorne himself. Eliza had seen him from a distance, but never this close. He was smaller than she'd expected, neat and precise in his city clothes, with pale eyes that reminded her of a snake's. Beside him stood the sheriff, Thomas Burke, looking uncomfortable but trapped. Ladies and gentlemen, Thorne was saying, his voice carrying the authority of money and power. I've called you here to discuss the future of Sagebrush Creek. The railroad brings opportunity, prosperity, a chance to build something lasting. Murmurs of agreement from the crowd. The promise of railroad money was seductive. But progress requires sacrifice. Thorne continued. We must clear away the old to make room for the new. Some establishments. His eyes found Eliza in the crowd. Represent the past. They hold us back with their unsavory elements. You mean the Dusty Rose? Someone called out. Thorne smiled, thin and sharp. Oh, I mean any business that caters to undesirable types, mixed breeds, loose women, the dregs that civilization leaves behind. The words hit Eliza like physical blows. Around her, she felt the crowd's mood shifting, old prejudices rising to the surface like scum on water. These people had known her all her life, but now they looked at her differently. That's enough. Ronan's voice cut through the murmur. He stepped forward, and the crowd parted unconsciously. Man wants to buy property. Make an offer. Don't hide behind pretty words and ugly thoughts. Thorne's pale eyes fixed on him. And you are? Someone who doesn't like bullies, no matter how fine their clothes. Ah, the drifter who's taken up residence at Miss Hawthorne's establishment. Thorne's tone made it sound sordid. Tell me, Mr. Ronan. Mr. Ronan, what's your interest here? Are you Miss Hawthorne's new business partner, or perhaps something more intimate? The crowd snickered, and Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks. Before she could speak, Ronan laughed, a sound with no humor in it. My interest is simple. I don't like seeing a man use his money like a club. Where I come from, we've got a word for that. Oh, and what word is that? Coward. The silence was deafening. Sheriff Burke's hand dropped to his gun. Though he didn't draw, Thorne's face went white, then red. Sheriff, arrest this man for disturbing the peace. Burke hesitated. Now, Mr. Thorne, he ain't exactly breaking any law. Then find one he is breaking. Thorne's voice was ice. Or find yourself a new job. This was the moment. Eliza realized the town would either stand up or bow down. She watched Burke wrestle with the choice, saw the moment his courage failed. Sam Ronan, you're under arrest for threatening behavior. Ronan's smile was sad. If that's how it's going to be. He unbuckled his gun belt, handed it to Eliza. Hold on to this for me. As Burke led him away, Ronan caught her eye. Remember what I said about how far you're willing to go. The crowd dispersed. Avoiding Eliza's gaze, only Thorne remained, approaching her with that snake smile. You see, Miss Hawthorne, your friends will always desert you. It's the natural order. Your kind doesn't belong here. He pulled out a paper. My final offer. More than the place is worth. Take it and start fresh somewhere else. She looked at the number. It was indeed generous, enough to begin again far from here. For a moment, she wavered. Then she thought of her mother, of the dreams built into every board of the Dusty Rose, of Ronan, willing to stand for her when no one else would. She tore the paper in half. The answer is still no. You stupid girl. The mask slipped, showing the vicious nature beneath. Do you know what I can do to you? What I will do? Your threats don't scare me. They should. He leaned close, and she smelled cologne and corruption. Ask your mother what happens to women who don't know their place. Oh, wait, you can't. Ice flooded her veins. What do you mean? But Thorne was already walking away, leaving her with questions that clawed at her heart. The rest of the day passed in a haze. No customers came to the Dusty Rose. Suppliers who had promised deliveries didn't show. The isolation was complete. The message clear: stand with Eliza Hawthorne and face Thorne's wrath. She spent the afternoon cleaning, trying to keep busy, trying not to think about Ronan in a cell or Thorne's cryptic words about her mother. Rose Hawthorne had died of fever. The doctors said, but now, doubt crept in like smoke under a door. As evening fell, she made a decision. Grabbing Ronan's gun belt and her father's old coat, she headed for the jail. The sheriff's office was a small building at the edge of town, more symbol than fortress. Burke sat at his desk, looking miserable. He's not here, he said before she could speak. What? Your friend. Thorne had him transferred to the county seat, said it was for his own safety. Burke couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry. Eliza, I've got a family too. We all have something to lose. Tom, question is what we're willing to sacrifice to keep it. She left him with his guilt and headed back to the Dusty Rose. The saloon had never felt emptier. She sat at the bar, Ronan's gun belt before her, and tried to think. Thorne had taken away her customers, her supplies, and now her only ally. What was left? The answer came as she ran her fingers over the worn leather of the gun belt. What was left was her. Just her. And whatever courage she could muster. A sound made her look up. The door opened, and 3 figures entered. Not Thorne's men, but women. Margaret Chen from the laundry, Sarah Brown, the minister's daughter, and old Agnes Murphy, who'd worked the Rose back in her mother's day. Thought you might need some company, Agnes said, her weathered face kind. Been too long since I set foot in here. We don't have much, Eliza warned. And being seen here... Hang Thorne, Margaret interrupted, surprising everyone with her vehemence. Man thinks he owns this town. Time someone reminded him different. They sat together as darkness fell, sharing what whiskey remained and stories of better days. Agnes talked about Rose Hawthorne, how she'd stood up to worse men than Thorne. Your mother was a fighter. Agnes said, ran that Underground Railroad stop right out of this very building, helped dozens of souls find freedom, made enemies doing it, but she never backed down. Underground Railroad. Eliza had never heard this. She never told you, probably trying to protect you. There were those who never forgave her for it. When she died. Agnes trailed off. What about when she died? The old woman looked uncomfortable. Just seemed sudden, is all. She was healthy as a horse one day, burning with fever the next, and Thorne had just come to town, making offers on property. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Her mother's death, Thorne's arrival, his cryptic threat. Rage built in Eliza's chest, hot and pure. He killed her, she whispered. Can't prove nothing after all this time, Agnes said carefully. But your mother had documents. She said, proof of the railroad work, names of people she helped. Said she kept them safe for insurance. Where? Never told me, but she was clever. Your mother. If they exist, they're hidden somewhere in this building. After the women left, with promises to return and spread word that the Dusty Rose wasn't alone, Eliza began to search. She started in her mother's old room, tapping walls, checking floorboards. Nothing. It was near dawn when exhaustion forced her to stop. She sat on the floor of the main room, surrounded by displaced furniture and pulled-up boards. Her hands were raw, splinters embedded in her palms, and she'd found nothing. Where did you hide them? Mama, she whispered to the empty room. A sound from outside made her freeze, footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate. She grabbed the shotgun, checked the loads, and positioned herself behind the bar. The door opened slowly. A figure stood silhouetted against the pre-dawn gray. Then familiar voice. Easy with that scattergun. I'm partial to keeping all my parts attached. Sam. She lowered the weapon as Ronan stepped inside. His clothes were dusty, his face showing signs of a fight, but he was whole. How did you... Sheriff Burke had a change of heart. Seems his conscience got the better of him. Left my cell unlocked and took a conveniently timed nap. He surveyed the chaos of her search. Redecorating. She explained about her mother, the Underground Railroad, the hidden documents. As she talked, his expression grew thoughtful. Your mother sounds like a smart woman. She'd hide something where it wouldn't be disturbed, where only someone who knew her would think to look. I've searched everywhere. Not everywhere. He moved to the piano, running his hands along its dusty surface. This was hers. She played every evening, said music made civilization out of wilderness. Without asking permission, he began to dismantle the instrument. Eliza watched, fascinated despite her exhaustion. His hands were gentle but sure, and within minutes he'd exposed the piano's interior. There, he said softly. Wrapped in oilcloth and tucked inside the frame was a packet of papers. Eliza's hands trembled as she unwrapped them. Documents, names, dates, records of the Underground Railroad, but more. Letters implicating several prominent citizens in the murder of a federal agent who'd gotten too close to their smuggling operation. And among the names, clear as day, Darius Thorne. This is it, she breathed. This is proof that he... This is dangerous, Ronan interrupted. Men have killed for less. We'll kill for this. Then we'd better be ready. He looked at her for a long moment, this woman with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. You came back. That makes it we. Dawn was breaking over Sagebrush Creek, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Outside, the town was stirring to life. Soon Thorne would know Ronan was free, would know his threats hadn't worked. The real fight was about to begin. The dust hadn't settled from Ronan's return when Darius Thorne made his next move. By noon, a parade of legal documents arrived at the Dusty Rose, delivered by a nervous clerk who wouldn't meet Eliza's eyes. Tax assessments backdated years. Building code violations that had never existed before. Health ordinance written in language so twisted even a Philadelphia lawyer would struggle to understand them. "He's drowning us in paper," Eliza said, spreading the documents across the bar. "Fines that would bankrupt me 10 times over." Ronan studied the papers with surprising attention. "Man who taught me to read also taught me law. Frontier law. Anyway." He tapped one document. "This here's claiming your property lines are wrong. Says the Dusty Rose is built 3 feet onto railroad land." "That's impossible. My father surveyed these lines himself." "Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what a judge says is true." He leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Thorne's not just some railroad baron. He's got reach, connections. These papers prove it." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see workers erecting a fence 3 feet into what had always been Dusty Rose property. Leading them was Jake Morrison, grinning like a cat with cream. "That tears it," Eliza muttered, reaching for the shotgun. Ronan caught her arm. "Not with scattershot and fury. That's what he wants, you to react. Give him excuse to bring the law down hard." "Then what?" "We play his game, but by our rules." He stood, settling his gun belt. "You still got friends in this town?" "Some, the women who came last night, a few others who remember my mother kindly." "Good. Time to remind Sagebrush Creek that memory matters more than money." They spent the afternoon making rounds, an unlikely pair on an unlikely mission. At the Chinese laundry, Margaret Chen listened with sharp intelligence as Eliza showed her the documents they'd found. "My husband's cousin works for the territorial newspaper," Margaret said. "Perhaps he'd be interested in a story about railroad corruption." At the minister's house, Sarah Brown was torn between propriety and justice. "Father would forbid me to get involved," she admitted. "But he's away at the church conference for 3 more days." Her smile was impish. "What he doesn't know won't trouble his conscience." Old Agnes Murphy proved the fiercest ally. "Been waiting 40 years for someone to stand up to men like Thorne," she declared. "Count me in. Whatever you need." But for every friend, they found 3 doors closed to them. Fear ran deep in Sagebrush Creek, deeper than loyalty or righteousness. As the sun began its descent, they returned to the Dusty Rose to find Sheriff Burke waiting, hat in hand. "Tom," Eliza said coolly, "come to arrest us again." "Come to warn you." He looked miserable, but determined. "Thorne's bringing in professionals. Hired guns out of Denver. They'll be here by week's end." "Pinkertons?" Ronan asked sharply. "Don't know. Maybe. All I know is he's done talking legal. These men, they don't much care about law versus lead." "And you're telling us this why?" Eliza couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Burke met her eyes for the first time in days. "Your mother saved my daughter once, when she had the fever and Doc was drunk. Rose sat up 3 nights straight, nursing her through. I failed her daughter once already, won't do it again." After he left, silence filled the saloon. The stakes had shifted. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about survival. "You should leave," Eliza said quietly. "This isn't your fight." Ronan was cleaning his pistol, movements methodical and calm. "Thought we settled that. You decided how far you're willing to go." "All the way," she said without hesitation. "Then we'd better get ready." The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of preparation. Ronan turned the Dusty Rose into a fortress, reinforcing doors, creating firing positions, stocking ammunition. Eliza's allies smuggled in supplies despite Thorne's blockade. Margaret Chen's laundry delivered clean sheets that happened to contain preserved food and medicine. Sarah Brown brought hymnals that concealed boxes of cartridges. On the 3rd night, Eliza found Ronan on the roof, keeping watch. The moon was new, and stars scattered across the sky like spilled silver. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, settling beside him. "Sleep's overrated." He passed her his canteen water, not whiskey. "Been thinking about what comes after." After, say we survive this, say we even win. What then, you rebuild the Dusty Rose, serve drinks to cowboys and drifters, grow old in this place. She'd been so focused on the fight. She hadn't thought beyond it. I don't know, never had the luxury of dreams beyond tomorrow. Your mother did. Those documents prove it. She dreamed of justice, freedom for folks who'd never known it. And it got her killed. Maybe. Or maybe she died knowing she'd made a difference. He was quiet for a moment. I've done a lot of killing in my time. Eliza, some deserved it, some were just in the way, but I never built nothing, never stood for something bigger than my own survival. You're standing now. Am I? Or am I just indulging my taste for violence with a prettier excuse? She studied his profile in the starlight. The scar on his face seemed silver, like a river of old pain. Without thinking, she reached out, traced it with her fingertip. How am I? Apache warrior, back when I thought I could live in both worlds. His voice was distant. He taught me different. Can't straddle two horses going opposite directions. Which horse did you choose? Neither. Made my own trail. He caught her hand, held it. That's what you're doing too, making your own way. Their faces were close now, close enough that she could feel his breath. The moment stretched between them, fragile as blown glass. Then a sound from the street below shattered it. Riders, Ronan whispered. All business now. 5, maybe 6. They scrambled down to find Jake Morrison and his crew spreading kerosene around the building's foundation. The sharp smell filled the air, promising destruction. That's far enough, Eliza called from the doorway. Shotgun leveled. Jake laughed. What are you gonna do? Girls shoot us all, you pull that trigger. My boys'll turn you and your breed friend into sieves. Maybe, Ronan said from the shadows. But you'll be too dead to see it. Jake's confidence wavered. He hadn't seen Ronan move to flank them. Thorne said, Thorne's not here. Ronan interrupted. Just you boys, about to make the last mistake of your lives. The tension stretched taut. Eliza's finger rested on the trigger, heart hammering. One wrong move and the street would run red. It was Agnes Murphy who broke the standoff. The old woman appeared from the darkness leading a group of townspeople. Not many, but enough. Margaret Chen, Sarah Brown, even some of the merchants who'd been too frightened to help before. What are you doing? Jake Morrison, Agnes demanded. Burning out women and children that what you've become. Ain't no children here. Jake protested. Just a half-breed whore and her The sound of Agnes's cane cracking across his shin cut him off. You watch your tongue, boy. I changed your diapers. Don't think I won't take a switch to you now. Faced with the disapproval of the town's matriarch, Jake's men began to shift uneasily. The moral authority of angry grandmothers, Eliza thought with dark humor, might be stronger than any gun. This ain't over, Jake snarled, but he was already backing away. Thorne's men will be here tomorrow. Real killers, not townfolk playing hero. After they left, Eliza sagged against the doorframe. Another crisis passed, but the real storm was still coming. Why, she asked the gathered townspeople, why risk it? Because, Margaret said simply, we remembered who we want to be, not the scared mice Thorns turned us into, but the people your mother believed we could be. They spent the rest of the night preparing. More townspeople trickled in, shamed into courage by their neighbors' example. By dawn, the Dusty Rose had become a symbol, not just of one woman's stand, but of a town's soul. Ronan pulled Eliza aside as the sun rose. When they come, and they will come hard, I need you to promise something. What? If things go bad, you run. Take those documents. Get to the territorial capital. Don't try to be a hero. Same goes for you. He smiled, sad and knowing. We both know I passed up my chance at heroics long ago. This is something else. What? Redemption, maybe, or just a good place to make a stand. Before she could respond, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Riders, moving fast and purposeful. The hired guns had arrived. Eliza looked around at her makeshift army shopkeepers and laundresses, a preacher's daughter and an old woman with a cane, not much against professional killers. But they were here, choosing to stand rather than kneel. She checked the loads in her father's Navy Colt, tucked her mother's documents safe inside her bodice, and prepared to find out just how far she was willing to go. The dust cloud grew larger, thunder of hooves echoing off the buildings. Somewhere a church bell began to toll, calling the faithful to morning service or counting down to judgment. In the Dusty Rose Saloon, 2 outcasts and a handful of ordinary heroes waited for violence to come calling, knowing that whatever happened next would write itself in blood and courage across the history of Sagebrush Creek. The real battle for the Dusty Rose was about to begin. The morning after the hired guns arrived, an uneasy quiet settled over Sagebrush Creek. The killers had taken rooms at the Imperial Hotel, Thorne's establishment at the far end of Main Street. Their presence was felt rather than seen, a shadow over the town's daily life. Eliza stood in her mother's old room, running her fingers along the faded wallpaper. In the light of recent discoveries, she saw the space differently. Every corner might hold secrets. Every board might conceal truth. "Looking for more ghosts?" Ronan asked from the doorway. "Looking for answers." She turned to face him. "Those documents we found, they prove Thorne's guilt. But there's more. Has to be." "What makes you think that?" "My mother was thorough, careful. She wouldn't put all her evidence in one place." Eliza moved to the small writing desk by the window. "When I was young, she used to sit here for hours, writing in her journal. Said she was recording history so it wouldn't be forgotten." "You think the journal's still here?" "I know it is. Question is where." She began examining the desk more carefully, fingers searching for hidden compartments. She was clever with her hands, made puzzle boxes, secret drawers. A soft click interrupted her. A panel in the desk's side popped open, revealing a leather-bound journal and more papers. Eliza's hands trembled as she lifted them out. The journal told a story of courage and conspiracy. Rose Hawthorne had indeed run an underground railroad station, but she'd also documented the illegal activities of several prominent citizens. Smuggling, claim-jumping, even murder. And woven through it all was Darius Thorne's name. "Look at this," Eliza breathed, showing Ronan a particular entry. She knew he was coming, knew what he planned. Ronan read aloud. "March 15th, Thorne's man approached me again. Offers money for my silence. Threatens worse if I refuse. He doesn't know about the federal marshal I've contacted. Help is coming. I must hold on until—" He stopped. "That's where it ends." "She died March 20th, Eliza said quietly. 5 days later. Among the papers was something even more damning, a contract between Thorne and several investors, detailing plans to seize land throughout the valley by any means necessary. The railroad was just a front for a massive land grab. "This changes everything," Ronan said. "This isn't just about your saloon. It's about the whole territory." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah Brown entered, face flushed with urgency. "They're coming," she said. "Thorne and his men. They're gathering at the Imperial." Eliza tucked the journal and papers into her bodice alongside the others. Whatever happened next, the truth would survive. They descended to find their small band of allies ready but nervous. Agnes Murphy sat at a table, calmly loading an ancient pepperbox pistol. "I didn't know you were armed." "Agnes," Eliza said, "lots you don't know about me. Child, I wasn't always old." She spun the cylinder with practiced ease. "Your mother and I stood against worse than hired thugs." Through the window, they could see the crowd gathering. Thorne stood on the Imperial's porch like a general reviewing troops. Beside him were 5 men who could only be the hired guns, hard-faced professionals with tied-down holsters and eyes like winter. He's making a speech, Margaret Chen reported from her position by the window, working the crowd up. Sure enough, Thorne's voice carried down the street. Lawlessness cannot be tolerated. The Dusty Rose has become a haven for undesirable elements. For the safety of our families, our children, it must be dealt with. He's giving them permission, Ronan said grimly, making it righteous. The mob began moving down Main Street, Thorne safely in the rear. The hired guns spread out, professional and purposeful. This wasn't going to be a simple confrontation. It was going to be a massacre disguised as civic duty. Positions, Ronan commanded, and their defenders scattered to predetermined spots. Remember, we don't shoot first, but when it starts, shoot to stop them. Eliza took her place behind the bar, shotgun ready. Through the saloon's windows, she could see the mob approaching. 50 people, maybe more. Not all were armed, but enough were. The crowd stopped just outside effective shotgun range. One of the hired guns stepped forward, a thin man with dead eyes and a smile like a knife wound. Name's Cole Younger, he called out. No relation to the famous one, Mr. Thorne has legally purchased this property. You folks are trespassing. Come out peaceful-like, and nobody gets hurt. I have the deed, Eliza shouted back. This property isn't for sale. Deed's been challenged in court. Judge signed the order this morning. Younger held up a paper. You're squatting on railroad land. What judge? Ronan demanded. When was the hearing? Emergency session. Public safety and all. Younger's smile widened. Now, you coming out, or do we come in? It was a sham, of course. No legitimate court would rule without allowing defense, but legality had become just another weapon in Thorne's arsenal. You want us out? Eliza called. Come and take us. For a moment, silence. Then Younger shrugged. Have it your way. The first shots shattered the morning air. Windows exploded in cascades of glass. Eliza dropped behind the bar as bullets chewed into the wood above her head. The battle for the Dusty Rose had begun. But something unexpected happened. As the hired guns advanced, shots rang out from other buildings. Tom Burke appeared on the roof of the hardware store, rifle in hand. Doc Hollis, sober for once, fired from his office window. Others joined in, townspeople who'd finally found their courage. The mob wavered, confused. They'd expected to overwhelm a few defenders, not face resistance from multiple directions. Push forward, Thorne screamed from his safe position. Burn it down! But military tactics work differently when the soldiers are shopkeepers and the battlefield is their own town. The mob began to fragment, some taking cover, others retreating entirely. Inside the Dusty Rose, the defenders held their ground. Agnes Murphy proved surprisingly deadly with her pepper box, keeping the north window clear. Margaret Chen had produced a rifle from somewhere and was calmly picking targets. Ronan moved like smoke through the building, appearing wherever the pressure was greatest. Eliza watched him work, efficient, lethal, but controlled. This wasn't the berserk violence of a killer. It was the measured response of a warrior. A crash from upstairs sent Eliza running. 2 men had entered through her window, Jake Morrison and Bull Henderson. They froze when they saw her, perhaps not expecting to face her directly. Well now, Jake sneered, recovering first. Looks like we get to finish our business after all. They advanced, and Eliza raised the shotgun, but in the close quarters, Bull managed to grab the barrel, wrenching it aside. The blast took out what remained of the window, and then they were on her. The fight was brutal and desperate. Jake grabbed for her throat while Bull tried to pin her arms. She fought with everything she had, nails, teeth, the fury of generations of women who'd been told they were less than human. A knife appeared in Jake's hand. Should have taken the money, girl. The blade descended. Eliza twisted desperately, felt it score along her ribs instead of finding her heart. Pain flared, hot and bright. Jake raised the knife again. The shot was impossibly loud in the small room. Jake's expression went slack, a red flower blooming on his chest. He toppled backward, revealing Ronan in the doorway, smoking pistol in hand. Bull released Eliza, hands going up. "I surrender, don't shoot!" "Get out," Ronan said, voice cold as mountain stone. "Tell Thorne it's over. Tell him we have proof of his crimes, and it's going to the federal marshals." Bull fled. Ronan was beside Eliza instantly, checking her wound. "It's not deep," she gasped, though blood was soaking her dress. "Just messy." "You're lucky." His hands were gentle as he pressed a cloth to the wound. "Inch to the left." But it wasn't. She caught his hand. "We need to end this." The gunfire outside was dying down. Through the broken window, they could see the mob dispersing. The hired guns, professionals to the end, had recognized a losing situation and melted away. Only Thorne remained, standing in the street, face twisted with rage. "It's not over," he screamed. "You hear me? I'll bring an army. Mr. Thorne," the voice came from behind him. A man in a black suit and badge stepped out from between buildings. Behind him were 6 more men, all armed, all wearing the unmistakable authority of federal law. "Marshal Fitzgerald," the man introduced himself. "We received some interesting documents about your activities. Think you'd better come with us." Eliza leaned against Ronan as they watched from the window. "How?" "Remember when Doc rode out yesterday, said he was visiting a patient?" Ronan smiled. "He was carrying copies of your mother's papers to the territorial capital. Seems the federal boys were already investigating Thorne. Your evidence was just what they needed." As Thorne was led away in irons, still screaming threats and denials, Sagebrush Creek began to breathe again. People emerged from buildings, some sheepish, some proud. The spell of fear was broken. Agnes Murphy summed it up best: "About damn time." Later, as Doc stitched Eliza's wound and the Dusty Rose's defenders celebrated their victory, she found herself alone with Ronan on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. "So what now?" she asked. "Thorne's gone. The threat's over. You'll be moving on." He was quiet for a long moment. "Been thinking about what you said, about making my own trail." He turned to her. "Might be that trail leads right here." "To a shot-up saloon in a dusty town." "To a woman who showed me that standing for something matters. That building something might be better than tearing things down." He touched her face gently. "If she'll have me." "She might," Eliza said, heart racing. "But you should know. I plan to do more than just run a saloon. My mother's work, helping people find freedom and justice. I want to continue it." "Sounds dangerous." "Sounds right." He smiled then, a real smile without edges or shadows. "Then I guess we'd better get started. That is, after we fix all these bullet holes." As night fell over Sagebrush Creek, the Dusty Rose stood battered but unbroken. In the morning, there would be repairs to make, a business to rebuild, a town to heal. But tonight, there was victory and hope and the promise of something new growing from the ashes of the old. The secret buried beneath the floorboards had been brought to light. The truth had set them free. And in a small saloon on the edge of forever, 2 souls who'd walked alone had found a trail worth traveling together. 2 weeks had passed since Thorne's arrest, and Sagebrush Creek was slowly finding its rhythm again. The Dusty Rose bore scars from the battle-patched walls, new windows, memories embedded in wood and stone. But it was alive with purpose, fuller each night as townspeople reclaimed their courage along with their drinking establishment. Eliza moved through the evening crowd, her side still tender where Jake's knife had found her. The wound was healing clean, Doc said, though it would leave a scar. Another mark to carry, another reminder of what standing up cost. She found Ronan at his usual corner table, teaching young Timothy Chen Margaret's boy how to whittle. The sight stirred something warm in her chest. The dangerous man who'd arrived weeks ago was still there, but tempered now by something gentler. "You're corrupting the youth," she teased, setting down a fresh beer. "Teaching useful skills," Ronan corrected. "Boy needs to know how to handle a knife proper." "For whittling," he added quickly at her raised eyebrow. Timothy held up his creation, a rough but recognizable horse. "Mister, Sam says I got natural talent." "That you do," Eliza agreed. "Now off with you. Your mother's expecting you home." After the boy scampered off, she sat down across from Ronan. The saloon's noise faded to a comfortable backdrop as they shared one of their quiet moments. "You're good with him," she observed. "He reminds me of someone." At her questioning look, he continued. "Had a younger brother once. Taught him to whittle, too, among other things." "What happened to him?" "Cavalry raid on our camp. He was 12. The words were flat, but she could hear the old pain beneath. "That's when I stopped trying to live in both worlds. Couldn't protect anyone standing in the middle." She reached across the table, took his hand. These glimpses into his past came rarely, precious as desert rain. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But watching Timothy," he squeezed her hand, "makes me think maybe I could try again, building something instead of tearing down." Their moment was interrupted by Agnes Murphy's cackle from the bar. The old woman had become a regular fixture, holding court and telling stories that grew more outrageous with each whiskey. "You should have seen Rose Hawthorne in her prime," Agnes was saying to a rapt audience. "Could shoot the eye out of a needle at 50 paces and charm the birds from the trees. Why, one time." Eliza smiled, but the mention of her mother brought back the weight of responsibility. The documents were safe now, copies with the federal marshals, originals hidden in a new location. But they represented more than just evidence against Thorne. They were a legacy, a calling. As if reading her thoughts, Ronan asked, "You've been thinking about what comes next?" It wasn't a question. He'd learned to read her moods like weather signs. "The Underground Railroad may be officially over," she said quietly. "But there are still people who need help. Indians forced from their lands, Chinese workers treated like slaves, women with no safe place to run. My mother saw the Dusty Rose as more than a saloon. She saw it as a way station for the desperate." "Dangerous work." "Yes." "You'll need help." "Yes." He smiled, that sharp smile she'd grown to love. "Good thing you've got some." Later that night, after the saloon had closed and the town slept, they sat by the dying fire in the main room. Eliza had spread her mother's papers on a table, mapping out the network Rose had built. She had contacts in Denver, Santa Fe, even San Francisco. Eliza explained. Safe houses, sympathizers, people who could provide new identities. Some are probably still active. "We'll need to be careful. Thorne's gone. But men like him are like weeds. Cut one down. 2 more spring up." "I know, but—" A soft knock interrupted her. They exchanged glances. Visitors after midnight rarely brought good news. Ronan's hand drifted to his gun as Eliza approached the door. "Who is it?" "Please," came a woman's voice, accented and afraid. "We need help." Eliza opened the door to find a young Mexican woman holding a baby, with 2 small children clinging to her skirts. All 4 were dusty, exhausted, and terrified. "Come in," Eliza said immediately. "You're safe here." The woman, Maria, she said her name was, told her story in halting English mixed with Spanish. Her husband had been killed in a mining accident, but the company claimed he owed them money. They were trying to take her children as payment to work in the mines. "They say my babies must pay their father's debt," Maria wept. "But what debt he gave his life to their mountain." Eliza and Ronan exchanged looks. This was exactly the kind of injustice Rose Hawthorne had fought against. "You did right coming here," Eliza said firmly. "We'll help you." She settled Maria and the children in her mother's old room, bringing food and warm blankets. The baby, barely 6 months old, was feverish, and the older children watched with eyes too knowing for their years. "Mining companies, the Fortuna Gold," Ronan said when they were alone again. "Heard of them. They basically own the town of Crystal Ridge. Sheriff, judge, everyone in their pocket. Then we get them somewhere beyond the company's reach. That means Colorado territory, maybe further. It's a long journey with children." "My mother did it, so can we." They spent the rest of the night planning. Agnes Murphy, awakened despite the late hour, provided invaluable insight. "There's a Catholic mission near Pueblo." She said, "Father Francisco, he helped your mother many times. Good man, asks no questions. That's 3 days' ride." Ronan calculated. "Through some rough country. And if the mining company's looking, they will be," Agnes confirmed. "Fortuna doesn't let assets slip away easy." By dawn, they had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was what they had. Eliza would take Maria and the children in the saloon's old freight wagon, disguised as a medicine show. Ronan would ride separately, scouting ahead and watching for trouble. "I don't like us separating," he said as they loaded supplies. "Neither do I, but a man, woman, and children traveling together draws different attention than a woman peddling remedies." He knew she was right, but she could see the reluctance in his eyes. Since the battle with Thorne's men, he'd been protective, never straying far. "I'll be careful," she promised. "You better be." He pulled her close, kissed her with a desperation that surprised them both. "Don't make me come rescue you." "Wouldn't dream of it." They left as the sun painted the eastern sky pink. Maria and the children hid in the wagon bed, covered by canvas and crates of Dr. Hawthorne's miracle elixir, actually bottles of Agnes's homemade tonic. The first day passed without incident. They made good time on the main road, Eliza playing her part as traveling medicine woman. A few people even bought bottles, though she warned them it was mostly sassafras and grain alcohol. That night, they camped in a grove of cottonwoods. Ronan appeared like a ghost from the darkness. Reporting all clear, they ate a cold meal, no fires to draw attention, and Maria told stories to keep her children calm. "You are brave," Maria said to Eliza later, as the children slept, "to risk yourself for strangers. My mother taught me that strangers are just friends we haven't met yet." She must have been special woman. She was. Ronan took first watch, and Eliza dozed fitfully. She dreamed of her mother, of Rose standing in this same grove, helping other desperate souls find freedom. The dream shifted, became a warning, riders approaching, danger closing in. She woke to find Ronan shaking her shoulder. "Company coming," he whispered. 5 riders, moving fast." They quickly doused any sign of their camp, hiding the wagon deeper in the trees. Eliza clutched her father's navy colt as the sound of hooves grew closer. The riders passed within 50 feet of their position. In the moonlight, she could see they wore badges, company enforcement, licensed thugs with legal authority in mining territories. "They're heading for Sagebrush Creek," Ronan breathed, "looking for their lost property." They waited until the hoofbeats faded, then quickly broke camp. No more main roads. They'd have to risk the rougher trails. The second day was harder. The wagon jolted over rocky ground, and the baby's fever worsened. Eliza did what she could with willow bark tea and cool compresses, but the child needed real medicine. "There's a trading post at Beaver Springs," Ronan said when he checked in. "Half a day north. Owner's a Frenchman. Keeps to himself." "Can we trust him?" "Trust is luxury we can't afford. But he's got no love for mining companies. They pushed him off his first claim." They reached Beaver Springs as afternoon shadows grew long. The trading post was a low adobe building with smoke rising from the chimney. A grizzled man emerged, squinting at them with suspicious eyes. "Closed," he announced in accented English. "Please," Eliza said. "We have a sick baby. We need medicine." The man, Pierre Dubois studied them carefully. His gaze lingered on Maria and the children, then shifted to Ronan standing watchful by the wagon. Come in then, he said finally. But any trouble finds my door. You brought it. Inside was a wonder of goods, everything from bear traps to bolts of cloth. More importantly, Dubois had a stock of medicines, including fever powder that soon had the baby resting easier. You run from the Fortuna. Yes, Dubois asked as Eliza paid for the supplies. They come through yesterday, asking about Mexican woman and children. What did you tell them? That I mind my own business. He spat into a brass spittoon. Lost my nephew in their mines. Cave-in they could have prevented. You need place to rest tonight. There's barn out back, no charge. Gratitude washed over Eliza. These small kindnesses from strangers made the work possible. That night, as Maria sang soft lullabies to her children in the barn, Eliza and Ronan sat watch together. The stars wheeled overhead, distant and eternal. Ever think you'd be doing this? She asked. Shepherding refugees through the night? A month ago, I'd have laughed at the idea. He shifted, checking sightlines out of habit. Now, seems like what I was meant to do all along. Just took finding the right reason. Am I the reason? He turned to her, face serious in the starlight. You're part of it, but it's more than that. It's choosing to be more than what the world tried to make me. Your mother understood that. So do you. She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, the final push to the mission, with Fortuna's men surely closing in. But tonight, they had this moment of peace. You smiled in your sleep last night, he said suddenly. When you were dreaming, was I the man in your dreams? The question caught her off guard, so different from his usual careful reserve. She could hear vulnerability beneath the teasing tone. Maybe, she said softly, or maybe I was dreaming of the future, of the dusty rows filled with laughter instead of fear, of children learning they're safe, of us. She turned in his arms, met his eyes directly, of us building something together, not just surviving, but living, really living. He kissed her then, under the vast western sky. And for a moment the dangers ahead faded away. They were just two people finding each other in the wilderness, choosing love over loneliness, hope over fear. A coyote called in the distance, reminding them of their duty. They returned to watching, but something had shifted between them. The unspoken had been spoken, the uncertain made sure. Tomorrow they would reach the mission, deliver Maria and her children to safety, then back to Sagebrush Creek, to the Dusty Rose, to the work of carrying on Rose Hawthorne's legacy. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, they kept watch together, guardians at the edge of darkness, proof that love could bloom even in the harshest ground. The storm rolled in fast from the mountains, turning the afternoon sky black as fresh tar. Thunder cracked like God's own whip, and the first fat raindrop struck the wagon's canvas as they urged the horses toward shelter. They'd delivered Maria and her children safely to Father Francisco's mission that morning. The priest, a round man with kind eyes, had welcomed them without questions, just as Agnes promised. Now, Eliza and Ronan were 2 days into their journey back to Sagebrush Creek, racing against weather and worse. There! Ronan shouted over the wind, pointing to a cluster of rocks forming a natural overhang. We'll wait it out there. They managed to get the wagon under cover just as the sky opened up proper. Rain fell in sheets, turning the desert into a temporary sea of mud and rushing water. Lightning painted the landscape in stark moments of blue-white clarity. Eliza busied herself checking their supplies while Ronan tended the horses. The animals were skittish, eyes rolling at each thunder crack. She couldn't blame them. The storm felt personal somehow, as if the sky itself was angry. This'll last hours, Ronan said, water streaming from his hat brim. Might as well get comfortable. They spread blankets on the relatively dry ground, backs against the rock wall. The storm raged beyond their shelter, but here they had a pocket of calm. Eliza pulled out the remains of their provisions, jerky, hard biscuits, and a flask of whiskey Agnes had tucked in for medicinal purposes. 2 successful missions. She toasted, passing him the flask. 2 partners who know when to duck, he countered, taking a swig. They ate in companionable silence, watching nature's fury. The rain had cooled the air considerably, and Eliza found herself shivering despite her coat. "Come here," Ronan said, opening his arms. She settled against him, his warmth immediately chasing away the chill. His arms encircled her, and she felt safer than she had any right to in the middle of a storm in the wilderness. "Tell me something," she said, "about before, about who Samuel Ronan was before he came to Sagebrush Creek." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was distant, talking to the storm as much as to her. "Samuel Ronan was my father's name. Irish immigrant. Came west with the railroad crews. Met my mother at a trading post. She was Apache, daughter of a war chief. Their marriage caused problems on both sides." "I can imagine." "No," he said softly. "You can't. The things people do when they're afraid, when they see something that doesn't fit their idea of how the world should be. My parents tried to make it work, built a little place between worlds, had me, then my brother Thomas." He paused, and she felt his arms tighten around her. "I was 15 when the soldiers came. Said there'd been raids, Apache attacks on settlers. Didn't matter that we weren't part of any raids, that my mother had been cast out for marrying white. We were Apache enough for them. Sam, they killed my parents first. Quick, at least. Thomas and I ran, but..." His voice caught. "Boy of 12 can't run fast enough. I got away because he told me to, because he faced them so I could..." Thunder rolled across the desert, echoing old pain. "I went to my mother's people, but I was too white for them. Went to the towns, but I was too Apache. So I became something else. Learned to use a gun, to track, to survive. Did things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. All in the name of not letting anyone hurt me again. What changed?" "You did." He turned her in his arms so they were face to face. "You stood there on that porch, ready to fight the whole world for what you believed in. Made me remember there were things worth fighting for besides survival." She reached up, traced the scar on his face, that silver line of old pain. "Your brother would be proud." "Maybe. I hope so." He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. "I know your mother would be proud of you. Sometimes I feel her." Eliza admitted. "Like she's watching, guiding. Sounds foolish." "No, not foolish. The dead stay with us, in our choices, our dreams." He smiled slightly. "Why else would we work so hard to honor them?" The storm was beginning to ease, thunder growing distant, but neither of them moved to continue their journey. This moment, this shelter from the storm, felt sacred somehow. "I dream about you," Eliza said suddenly, the admission tumbling out before she could stop it. "Even before that night you asked, I'd dream about a man I hadn't met yet, someone who'd understand the weight of being between worlds. And was I the man in your dreams?" She smiled at the echo of their conversation from nights past. "You are, though the real you is somewhat more frustrating than the dream version." "How so?" "Dream you didn't track mud through my clean saloon, or teach impressionable young boys knife tricks, or make me feel things I'd sworn off feeling." His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle as butterfly wings. "What things?" "Hope," she whispered. "Trust, love." The last word hung between them like lightning afterglow. They danced around it for days, but here in this storm-given sanctuary, pretense seemed pointless. "Eliza," he began, but she pressed fingers to his lips. "I know all the reasons we shouldn't, The danger of the work we've chosen, the fact that men like Thorne will always exist, the way the world looks at people like us. I know all of it, and I don't care. You should care. You deserve. I deserve to choose, she interrupted. And I choose you. I choose this, fighting together, building something together. That's my dream now. He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw his walls crumble like adobe in rain. When he kissed her, it was different from before, not desperate or searching, but certain. A promise made in the shelter of stone while the sky wept itself clean. When they finally pulled apart, the storm had passed. Sunset light slanted under the clouds, turning the wet desert into a landscape of gold and shadow. We should make camp, Ronan said practically, though his voice was rough. Horses are tired, and traveling these roads at night after rain. Ever the voice of reason, she teased, but she knew he was right. They set up a proper camp in the lee of the rocks. The storm had left the air crystal clear, and stars began emerging like scattered diamonds. They worked together with the ease of long practice, starting a fire, preparing food, laying out bedrolls. As they sat by the fire later, Eliza pulled out her mother's journal. She'd taken to reading it in quiet moments, learning more about the woman Rose had been. Listen to this, she said, finding a particular passage. Today I helped a family of 5 reach safety. The children were so frightened, but by journey's end they were laughing. This is why we do what we do, to turn fear into hope, desperation into possibility. The Dusty Rose may serve whiskey, but its true business is serving humanity. Wise woman. She was. I just hope I can live up to her legacy. You already have. Maria and her children are proof of that. One family, she helped dozens. And you'll help dozens more. Hundreds, maybe. He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. What we started isn't ending with Maria. Word will spread. Others will come. And we'll be ready. They talked long into the night, planning and dreaming in equal measure. The Dusty Rose would continue as a saloon, but it would also be a way station once again. They'd need to expand their network, find more sympathizers, establish new routes. We'll need help, Eliza said. Can't do it all ourselves. Tom Burke's proven he's got backbone when it counts, and Doc Hollis when he's sober. Margaret Chen has cousins in Denver who might help, and Agnes knows everyone from here to California. Building a regular underground empire, Ronan said with that sharp smile. Empire of hope, Eliza corrected. Empire of second chances. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the rocks. Despite the hard ground and uncertain future, Eliza couldn't remember feeling more at peace. Regrets? Ronan asked suddenly. About what? This, us, the dangerous path we're choosing. She considered the question seriously. A month ago, I was alone, fighting just to keep my mother's building. Now I have purpose, allies, and... She smiled at him across the fire. And you? No regrets. Even though I'm frustrating. Especially because you're frustrating. Keeps life interesting. He laughed, a real laugh that transformed his usually guarded features. In that moment, she could see the boy he'd been before loss and violence shaped him into something harder. It made her heart ache with tenderness. We should sleep, he said eventually. Want to make Sagebrush Creek by tomorrow night. They banked the fire and laid out their bedrolls side by side. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to human struggles. But beneath them, 2 people had found each other, had chosen to build something worth defending. Sam, Eliza said into the darkness. That night, when you asked if you were the man in my dreams, I wasn't entirely truthful. She felt him tense beside her. Oh, you weren't just in my dreams. You were my dream. Someone who'd understand, who'd stand with me, who'd make me brave enough to be everything my mother hoped I could be. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. Eliza Hawthorne, you were brave long before I came along. Maybe, but now I'm brave with hope instead of desperation. That makes all the difference. They lay quietly after that, hands clasped between their bedrolls like a bridge between two shores. Tomorrow would bring them back to Sagebrush Creek, to the work and danger that awaited. But tonight they had this stars and silence and the knowledge that whatever came, they'd face it together. Just before sleep took her, Eliza smiled. Somewhere, she was certain. Rose Hawthorne was smiling too. The dusty rose would continue its true work, and love had bloomed in the most unlikely ground. The desert night wrapped around them like a blanket, and two dreamers slept beneath the eternal stars, their separate paths now woven into one. The courthouse in Sagebrush Creek had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was filled, people standing along the walls and spilling out onto the porch. The whole town had turned out for what folks were calling the trial of the decade, though it wasn't Darius Thorne in the defendant's chair. It was Eliza Hawthorne. She sat straight-backed beside her lawyer, a young man from Denver named William Hutchinson, who'd taken the case for free after hearing about her mother's Underground Railroad work. Across from them, Thorne's team of high-priced attorneys looked like vultures in their black suits. The charge, Judge Harrison intoned, is illegal possession of property, fraud, and conspiracy to interfere with lawful business operations. Thorne had returned to Sagebrush Creek like a bad penny. His federal charges mysteriously dropped through what Ronan called the golden key of justice. Enough money to unlock any door. Now he was using the law like a bludgeon, claiming the Dusty Rose had always belonged to the railroad by prior agreement. Your Honor, the lead prosecutor, a snake named Jameson, began. We will prove that Rose Hawthorne obtained this property through fraudulent means, and that her daughter has perpetuated this fraud while engaging in criminal activities. Objection, Hutchinson said mildly. Prejudicial and inflammatory. Sustained. Stick to the facts. Mr. Jameson. Eliza caught Ronan's eye where he sat in the front row. He gave her the slightest nod. Courage. Around him sat their allies, Agnes Murphy, glaring daggers at Thorne. Margaret Chen taking notes. Doc Hollis sober for the occasion. And surprisingly, Sheriff Burke in civilian clothes. The first day was all legal maneuvering. Documents presented, claims and counterclaims. But Eliza knew the real battle would come when witnesses took the stand. That night, they gathered at the Dusty Rose, closed by court order but still theirs for now. Hutchinson spread papers across a table, his young face creased with worry. They've got forged documents that look authentic enough to fool most people, he said. And witnesses willing to swear Rose stole the original deed. Bought witnesses, Ronan growled. Doesn't matter. Their testimony will carry weight. Hutchinson turned to Eliza. We need something dramatic. Something that proves not just your ownership, but exposes Thorne's larger crimes. We have Mother's journal, Eliza said. The Underground Railroad documents, which Jameson will argue makes her a criminal, not a hero. This is 1870, Miss Hawthorne. The war may be over, but feelings about that particular activity still run hot and cold. Agnes Murphy spoke up from her corner. What about the other documents, the ones about the federal agent? Hutchinson shook his head. Without corroborating evidence, it's just accusations. We need... A knock interrupted him. Tom Burke entered, glancing around nervously. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but thought you should know. Thorne's bringing in a surprise witness tomorrow. Won't say who, but his lawyers look mighty pleased. After Burke left, the mood was grim. Eliza walked out onto the porch, needing air. Ronan followed, standing beside her in comfortable silence. We could run, he said eventually. Take what we can. Start over somewhere else. Is that what you think we should do? No, but I had to say it. He turned to her. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it. Together. Together, she agreed, and drew strength from the word. The second day of trial brought the surprise witness, a woman in an elegant traveling dress who swept into the courtroom like she owned it. Eliza's blood chilled as she recognized her Victoria Ashford, her mother's former best friend who'd left town years ago. "State your name for the record," Jameson instructed. "Victoria Ashford Pemberton. I was Rose Hawthorne's closest confidant for many years." "And what can you tell us about how she acquired the Dusty Rose?" Victoria's testimony was devastating. She painted Rose as a manipulator who'd stolen the deed from its rightful owner, a prospector who died mysteriously. She hinted at Rose's involvement in illegal activities, careful to sound reluctant, as if it pained her to speak ill of the dead. "She told me once," Victoria said, dabbing at her eyes, "that she'd do anything to keep that saloon, anything." When Hutchinson cross-examined, Victoria had an answer for everything. She was polished, prepared, and utterly convincing. Eliza felt the courtroom's mood shifting against her. "During the lunch recess," Agnes pulled Eliza aside. "That woman's lying through her teeth," the old woman hissed. "Victoria Ashford was jealous of your mother from day one. Rose took the man she wanted, built the life she couldn't have. Can you prove it?" "Maybe." Agnes's eyes gleamed. "Give me an hour." Court reconvened with Thorne's lawyers, calling more witnesses. Merchants who testified about the Dusty Rose being a den of vice. Former employees who'd been paid to remember things differently. Each testimony built on the last, creating a narrative of criminality and fraud. Eliza felt the walls closing in. Even Hutchinson looked discouraged. But then Agnes Murphy marched into the courtroom carrying a dusty box. "Your Honor," Hutchinson said, rising, "I'd like to recall Victoria Pemberton to the stand." Jameson objected. "But Judge Harrison allowed it." Victoria returned to the witness chair, looking less composed than before. Mrs. Pemberton," Hutchinson began. "You testified that you left Sagebrush Creek in 1865, correct?" "Yes." "And you've had no contact with anyone from the town since then?" "That's right." Hutchinson took a letter from Agnes's box. "Then how do you explain this correspondence, dated 1868, between you and Darius Thorne?" Victoria went pale. "I don't. That must be a forgery?" "Shall I read it aloud? Dear Mr. Thorne, I'll be happy to testify against Rose Hawthorne as we discussed. My price remains the same, $5,000 and safe passage to San Francisco." "Your handwriting, I believe." The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison banged his gavel repeatedly, demanding order. "There are dozens more," Hutchinson continued, pulling out letter after letter. "A 3-year correspondence plotting against Rose Hawthorne, planning her murder, celebrating when she died of fever." "Where did you get those?" Victoria shrieked, abandoning all pretense. Agnes stood up in the gallery. "From your sister's house, where you've been hiding them. She's tired of keeping your secrets. Victoria, tired of the guilt." What followed was chaos. Victoria broke down, admitting everything, how Thorne had recruited her to spy on Rose, to help frame her for crimes she didn't commit. When that failed, they'd poisoned her, making it look like fever. "But the property was supposed to be mine," Victoria sobbed. "He promised me instead. He kept it all for himself, threw me aside like trash." Judge Harrison had heard enough. "Mr. Thorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and fraud. Sheriff Burke, do your duty." But Thorne wasn't going quietly. He pulled a derringer from his coat, pointing it wildly at the crowd. "You think you've won?" he screamed. "I own this town. I own all of you." The gun swung toward Eliza. Time slowed. She saw Ronan moving, too far away, saw the madness in Thorne's eyes, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot was thunderous in the enclosed space. But it wasn't Thorne's derringer. Doc Hollis stood in the aisle, smoking pistol in his steady hand. Thorne crumpled, gun clattering away, unfired. "I never did like that man," Doc said conversationally. "Bad for my business. Dead folks don't need doctors." In the aftermath, as Thorne was carried out alive but headed for prison, Judge Harrison made his ruling. The court finds all charges against Miss Eliza Hawthorne dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, full ownership of the Dusty Rose Saloon is confirmed to rest with her, free and clear of all claims. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Eliza found herself swept up in embraces, Agnes cackling with glee, Margaret crying with joy, even Tom Burke shaking her hand with something like pride. But it was Ronan she sought, finding him standing apart from the celebration, that small smile playing at his lips. "We did it," she said. "You did it. I just stood around looking menacing." "Samuel Ronan, you know that's not true." He caught her hands, pulled her close despite the crowded room. "Maybe, but this was your fight, your victory. Your mother would be—" She kissed him, cutting off words with action. Around them, people cheered louder, but Eliza heard none of it. There was only this moment, this man, this future spreading out before them like an open road. Later, back at the Dusty Rose, the celebration continued. The saloon was open again, drinks flowing freely. Someone had found a fiddle, and dancing had broken out. Even Hutchinson had stayed, tie loosened, accepting congratulations and free whiskey with equal grace. Eliza stood behind the bar, watching her community, for that's what they'd become through this trial. The fear that had gripped Sagebrush Creek was broken. In its place grew something stronger: pride, unity, hope. "Penny for your thoughts," Ronan said, appearing beside her. Thinking about Mother, about how she'd see this. She'd see her daughter standing tall, her legacy continued, her dreams made real. Our dreams now, Eliza corrected. The Dusty Rose is just the beginning. There are so many who need help, who need what we can offer. Dangerous dreams. The best kind. Agnes Murphy climbed onto a chair, raising her glass. "A toast," she called out. "To Rose Hawthorne, who showed us the way to Eliza Hawthorne, who showed us our courage, and to the Dusty Rose, may she stand forever." The crowd roared approval. Glasses raised high, but Agnes wasn't done. "And to young Sam Ronan," she added with a wicked grin. "Who's gonna make an honest woman of our Eliza? Or I'll know why." Laughter filled the saloon as Eliza blushed furiously. But Ronan just pulled her closer, whispering in her ear. "She's not wrong. You know, a man should make his intentions clear. Are you proposing in the middle of a bar fight victory party? Would you have it any other way?" She looked around at their friends, their home, their future. Then back at him, this complicated, dangerous, wonderful man who'd walked into her life and changed everything. "No," she said, laughing. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the party continued around them, they slipped out onto the porch. The stars were coming out, same as they had for Rose Hawthorne, same as they would for generations yet to come. "So what now?" Ronan asked. "Now we build, we grow, we help, we live." She took his hand. "Together." "Together," he agreed. Inside, someone struck up a song, an old ballad about love and justice, about standing firm when the world says bo. Eliza and Ronan stood listening, hands clasped, hearts full. The Dusty Rose had weathered its storm. Now it was time to see what they could grow in the aftermath. Justice had been served, but their real work was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the trial, and the Dusty Rose stood transformed. Fresh paint gleamed on the walls, new windows sparkled in the morning sun, and a carved sign reading Rose Heritage Hotel and Saloon swung gently in the breeze. But the real transformation ran deeper than wood and paint. Eliza stood on the renovated second floor, looking down at what they'd built. The old storage rooms had become safe havens, comfortable quarters for those seeking refuge on their journey to new lives. Currently, they housed a Chinese family fleeing railroad camp violence and a young woman escaping an arranged marriage to a man old enough to be her grandfather. "Morning rounds?" Ronan asked, appearing with 2 cups of coffee. "Just checking on our guests." She accepted the cup gratefully. "The Changs will move on tomorrow. Father Francisco has work for them at the mission. And Rebecca, still deciding. She's got talent with numbers. Might stay and help with the books." It had become their pattern. People arrived scared and desperate, stayed long enough to catch their breath and find their courage, then moved on to new possibilities. The Dusty Rose had become exactly what Rose Hawthorne had envisioned, a way station for hope. "Sheriff's downstairs," Ronan said. "Wants to talk to you." They found Tom Burke at his usual table, looking uncomfortable as always. Despite proving himself during the trial, he still seemed uncertain of his welcome. "Tom," Eliza greeted him. "Coffee." "Thanks." He waited until she'd poured before continuing. "Got word from the marshal's office. They're asking questions about your side business, which is completely legal." Ronan pointed out. "No law against giving folks a room and a meal." "No, but there's laws about harboring fugitives. And that Chinese family, the railroad company, claims they broke contract by leaving." "Contract?" Eliza scoffed. "You mean slavery by another name. I know that. You know that. But the law?" Burke sighed. "Look, I came to warn you. Federal investigators might come sniffing around. You need to be careful." After he left, Eliza and Ronan exchanged worried looks. They'd known this day would come. As their network grew, so did the danger of exposure. "Maybe we should slow down," Ronan suggested. "Let things cool off. And tell the next desperate family there's no room at the inn." Eliza shook her head. "No, we just need to be smarter." That afternoon, she called a meeting of their inner circle. Agnes Murphy arrived first, followed by Margaret Chen, Doc Hollis, and, surprisingly, William Hutchinson, who'd stayed in Sagebrush Creek to set up a law practice. "We need better systems," Eliza explained. "Codes, signals, legal protections." "I can help with the legal side," Hutchinson offered. "Set up contracts that'll stand scrutiny." "My cousins in Denver have experience with this," Margaret added. "They've been helping Chinese workers escape bad situations for years." They spent hours planning, creating a network that could withstand investigation. By evening, they had the framework of something solid, a system of legitimate businesses providing cover for their real work. As the others left, Agnes lingered. "Your mother would be proud," she said. "But she'd also remind you to live your own life too. When's the wedding?" Eliza blushed. She and Ronan had spoken of marriage but hadn't set a date. Always too busy with the work. "Soon," she promised. "Better be. I'm not getting younger. And I plan to dance at your reception." That night, Eliza found Ronan on the roof. Their private retreat. The stars spread above them like scattered diamonds, and the town below settled into evening quiet. "Busy day," he observed as she joined him. "They all are lately." She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Sometimes I wonder if we've taken on too much." "Having doubts?" "No, just—" She searched for words. "Mother did this work for years, but she also had a life, a husband, a child, moments of simple happiness. I don't want to lose sight of that." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Agnes cornered me today. Threatened to take a switch to me if I didn't make an honest woman of you soon." Eliza laughed. "She cornered me too. That woman's determined to see us married." "Smart woman." He turned to face her. "What do you say? Eliza Hawthorne, want to make it official?" "Is that your idea of a proposal? Would you prefer something fancier I could get down on one knee? Make a speech about your eyes being like stars or some such. Don't you dare! She kissed him soundly. Yes, Samuel Ronan, I'll marry you. But we do it right, a real celebration. The whole town invited. Show them that joy can bloom even in hard ground. Next month, spring wedding, when the desert blooms, she smiled. Mother always said spring was for new beginnings. Plans for the wedding swept through Sagebrush Creek like wildfire. Margaret Chen offered to make Eliza's dress, her seamstress skills legendary. Doc Hollis volunteered to give her away. Staying sober for the occasion, even Tom Burke got involved, organizing security to ensure no unwanted guests disrupted the celebration. But their other work didn't stop. 2 weeks before the wedding, a group of former slaves arrived, heading west to claim homestead land. They were being pursued by men claiming they owed debts to their former masters. It's a lie. Their leader, Moses Washington, explained. We're free men, got our papers right here, but they don't care about papers. Eliza and Ronan hid them in the safe rooms while Hutchinson worked his legal magic. It took 3 tense days, but eventually the pursuers were forced to acknowledge they had no claim. The freedmen moved on, but not before Moses pressed a small carved wooden box into Eliza's hands. For your wedding, he said, made it myself, so you remember what you do here matters. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. The whole town had pitched in to decorate the dusty rose. Flowers bloomed everywhere, desert roses, Indian paintbrush, anything that could add color to the celebration. Eliza stood in her mother's room, now hers, as Margaret made final adjustments to the dress. It was simple but elegant, white cotton with delicate embroidery at the edges. You look beautiful. Rebecca, their former guest turned bookkeeper, said, like a queen, like a saloon owner getting married. Eliza corrected, but she smiled at her reflection. For the first time in years, she looked purely happy. Agnes burst in without knocking. The groom's waiting, looking nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. You ready? Ready. The ceremony was held in the saloon itself, transformed with flowers and ribbons. The crowd spilled out onto the street townsfolk, travelers, people they'd helped who'd returned for the celebration. It seemed all of Sagebrush Creek had come to witness this union. Ronan waited at the makeshift altar, looking uncomfortable in his new suit, but smiling that rare, true smile. When he saw her, his face transformed with wonder. Dearly beloved, Reverend Brown began. Sarah's father having returned from his conference with new ideas about acceptance and love. We gather today to witness something precious, 2 souls choosing to build a life together. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When they exchanged vows, Eliza heard her voice strong and clear. I take you, Samuel Ronan, to stand beside me in joy and sorrow, in safety and danger, in the work we've chosen and the life we'll build. I take you, Eliza Hawthorne, he replied, to be my partner in all things, to share your dreams and make them mine, to protect what we create and honor what came before. When Reverend Brown pronounced them married, the cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. Ronan kissed her thoroughly, and for a moment, there was only them, only this. The celebration lasted well into the night. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Everyone had contributed something. The piano, finally tuned, rang out with joyful music. Even the Chinese workers from the railroad camp came, bringing lanterns that turned the night magical. As Eliza danced with her new husband, she saw all the threads of their work woven together. Former guests mingled with townspeople. Children of different colors played together. The fear that had once gripped Sagebrush Creek had given way to something beautiful. No regrets, Ronan asked as they swayed to a slow waltz. None, only that it took us so long to get here. We were busy, she reminded him, building something important. And we'll keep building, but tonight, he spun her, making her laugh. "Tonight, we just dance." Later, as the party wound down, Eliza stepped onto the porch for air. The stars looked down, same as always, but somehow brighter. She thought of her mother, of the legacy Rose had left not just in property, but in purpose. "Thank you," she whispered to the night, "for showing me the way." A hand touched her shoulder. "Agnes, coming to say good night." "Your mother's here," the old woman said simply. "In every flower, every smile, every life you've touched. She's here." As dawn approached and the last guests stumbled home, Eliza and Ronan stood in their saloon, their hotel, their way station, their home. Empty bottles and full hearts, scattered flowers and new promises. "So, Mrs. Ronan," he said, trying out the name, "what now?" Now. She looked around at what they'd built, what they'd continue building. "Now we live, we love, we keep the doors open for those who need us. We prove that even in the harshest ground, beauty can bloom. Together. Always together." They climbed the stairs to their room as the first light of dawn painted the desert rose gold. Behind them, the dusty rose stood ready for another day, another chance to transform fear into hope, strangers into family, dreams into reality. The heritage of Rose Hawthorne lived on, stronger than ever, in the joined hands and united hearts of two people who'd chosen love over fear, justice over comfort, and each other over everything else. In Sagebrush Creek, where the desert met the sky and courage grew wild as sagebrush, the story continued, not ending but beginning again with each sunrise, each traveler seeking shelter, each moment of grace in a hard world. The dusty rose stood eternal, testament to the power of standing firm, loving, fierce, and never forgetting that even in the darkest night, dawn always comes to those who dare to hope. Thank you all for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're listening during a long drive, relaxing at home, or perhaps even somewhere out in the wide open spaces that remind you of old Sagebrush Creek. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's connect over our shared love of these frontier stories. If you enjoyed Eliza and Ronan's journey, please subscribe to Wild West Night channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to press the hype button to help more listeners discover this story. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunrise.